So you have written your AXI write address, driver and sequencer, and the next part is the agent. So if you remember, the agent is a class which is instantiating, which is a container class for clubbing all the driver, sequencer and monitor together. In our case, we are not writing any monitor class here. So our agent class, AXI write ADDR agent class, is extending from the UVM agent, and it is using the component registration macro, the factory registration macro, which is the component utils. And next, it need to instantiate these two classes which you have written just now, the sequencer class and the driver class. So I'm giving the name like mSequencer and mDriver for these classes. Next is a virtual interface handle. Typically, you will not give the virtual interface handle within an agent. So hold on there. We'll come to this interface in a short while, and we'll go to other functions. So the new function is exactly same as that of any other UVM component. And next is the build phase function. In this case, in the case of an agent, it got some other child components. In our case, we got a sequencer and driver. So build phase is a task where it's a function where you should actually create sub objects within a UVM component. So in this case, I need to create this mSequencer and mDriver handles, or in simple words, I need to call the new function for mSequencer and mDriver. And this is the order in which you will do this. So first you will call the super.build phase function, which will call the build phase of the original UVM agent, which is a compulsory statement here. And next is a UVM config.db call, which we will explain in a short while. And after that, I'm creating this mSequencer and mDriver class handles just by using the UVM factory. So if you remember that class name colon type ID colon create along with the arguments is the format to create any UVM class handles by using the factory. So in the first case, I'm using mSequencer is equal to the mSequencer type, which is AXI write ADDR sequencer colon type ID colon create. And next I need to pass the arguments. So first argument, if you remember, was a string, and the second argument ideally should always be this argument. So this handle to the object of the particular agent class. So the parent class of this sequencer and driver will be this agent class. And after this, you need to do any configuration settings. So one compulsory configuration setting is passing the interface handle to the driver and to the monitor if there are any. And you will get all the configurations by using the UVM config.db. So this is the UVM config.db call. At this point, again, you don't pay attention to these 3 lines. We will come back to the agent class once you have completely gone through this test bench and you have seen the initial part of the first test bench. And just remember that after this executing these 3 lines of code, you will get an actual handle of the virtual interface into this variable mINDF. So you don't need to put this mInterface in as a member of this class. You can actually make it as a local variable here as well. The only purpose of using this variable here is a use of a temporary variable, just to take an object handle from this config.db and pass it into the driver. So this is the build phase function of your agent. So as I said earlier, in the build phase function, you need to create the sequencer and driver handles by using the UVM factory. And before that, you need to get this configurations of this agent from the config.db, which you will see again at the end of this course. And after creating this sequencer and driver handles, we need to pass these configurations to this sequencer and driver classes. In our case, we need to pass the interface handles. And next important function in case of an agent is a connect phase function. So build phase function and connect phase functions are the functions which are called before the run phase task. So in UVM, before starting the execution at 0 time, there are many other phases where every set of tasks and functions in all UVM based classes will be called. And first, for every classes, first the build phase function will be called, and after building all the component hierarchy, the next connect phase functions will be called. Again, don't worry about this at this point, but just remember that whenever you wanted to connect two different components together, that kind of logic you will be writing within the connect phase function in the UVM. In our case, we need a connection from the sequencer and the driver. Because as I said earlier, a sequence will be starting on a particular sequencer. So whenever you send transactions from the sequence, you will get it in the sequencer. But if you are not connecting the sequencer to the driver will not get those transactions. Therefore, it is important to make a connection between the sequencer and the driver in any agent. In short words, in an agent, you need to add a task called connect phase with the same UVM phase argument, and you need to call the super phase connect phase statement, and after that you need to connect any ports or analysis port if there are any. In your case, you need to connect your driver to the sequencer, and this is a standard way of connecting a driver to the sequencer. The driver variable dot seek item port dot connect within the bracket give the sequencer variable dot seek item export. So here m driver is the driver handle and m sequencer is the sequencer handle. So this is again a standard way. You should always do a connection between the driver and sequencer, and this is how you will do it, like the driver handle dot seek item port dot connect within the bracket the sequencer handle dot seek item export. And you don't need to write any intelligence to this AXI agent, because it is just a container which will contain the sequencer and driver, and which will make the connections between them. Therefore, your run phase task typically in agents will be an empty task. To summarize an agent, it should have a sequencer, driver, and if there is a monitor, write the monitor here as well. And in the build phase function, create all the sub component objects, and also get the configuration of this particular agent or this particular interface, and pass those configurations to the child classes. And in the connect phase function, make the appropriate connections between the child class functions, child classes here. In typical case, you should always wanted to make a connection between a driver and a sequencer, like driver.seekItemPort.connect as to sequencer.seekItemExport. By doing this connection, the transactions that were sent from a sequence will be received within the driver seek item port. So sequence is sending a transaction, it will be received within the driver at this point of execution.